I got to get access to the whatever the Democrat listserv is or the email list or whatever, where they all get their assigned talking points from the DNC, because I would just love to see exactly how they manage to convince so many people who are supposed to think that mortgaging or selling out their own intellectual credibility. I mean, looking like total bozos all the time is the price you have to pay now for being a Democrat. I mean, you have to be so subservient. You have to be such a little toady, a little quisling.
You have to be a little Brian Stelter over CNN. Whatever Jeff tells me, I'll say. I hate Fox News.
That's what you got to do. So he's one of many. He's really an archetype. He's really the quintessential version of the toadying leftist, the throne-shining lib that will say whatever he has to say. No intellectual honesty, no journalistic integrity whatsoever. But there's so many of them. And you have, here, I've never even heard of this guy before, Florida State Attorney Dave Ehrenberg. He's getting in on this too. Maybe he wants to, get a promotion in a Biden administration. Play 8.
The president is taking a page from the desperation chapter of the dictator's playbook. His other October surprises have not worked. The Durham report still hasn't come out. It's not going to come out till after the election. The investigation into the unmasking and spying of his campaign has been a big nothing burger. Hunter Biden's laptop, that whole thing has been fizzling. It looks like it's tied to Vladimir Putin in Moscow. So he's stuck. And so that's why this all sounds eerily familiar. Barbara's right. This is what we saw with the president of Ukraine, where he's demanding an announcement of an investigation because he knows the power of that. Even though it got him impeached, he knows that that's how he got elected in 2016.
I don't even know what that guy thinks. He thinks he's saying, but he sounds like a complete moron. But let's understand this. At this stage, with a desperate Biden campaign that is running a weak candidate who is too old for the job, who has been unimpressive as a legislator for decades, who was a non-event VP chosen by Obama because, they just needed somebody from inside the system who wasn't going to make too much noise or be too annoying. So in that sense, I guess he sufficed. But now it's a question of stupidity as fealty. You have to go out there. If you're a Democrat, if you're going to be a good little soldier for the DNC, you got to go out there and say things that you must know at some level make you look like a moron. You have to. And in fact, the dumber you're willing to sound, the more extreme you're willing to be in your denunciations of this as Russian propaganda and tying this to Vladimir Putin. Well, why not just say that this is an FSB or an SVR operation? Why not just tell everybody that that's it? Why not go the extra mile? Trump is actually a Russian asset. Oh, well, they've already said that. How could they make this more extreme? Oh, Rudy Giuliani's a Russian asset. I heard that one recently, too. These people will defame anyone. I mean, if you think Rudy Giuliani is an asset of the Russian government, you're not an intelligent human being. But remember, there are the people that are too dumb to understand what the lies are, which a lot of Democrats. And then there are the people that are willing to embrace a stupid lie because it advances their position and makes getting a position in the Biden administration, a senior position, more likely. I always say this, and people get mad at me. They go, "Oh, Buck, don't say anything good about the other side. Don't say anything good about the other team." The left takes care of its fighters. The left takes care of people that even, Tubin. I mean, I've avoided, because I know a lot of you have kids who listen to the show, and I always want you to know your 8-year-old, your 10-year-old, they'll always be safe listening to everything the Buck Sexton show. You might have to explain a little bit to them afterwards, but nothing that would be inappropriate or you'd say, uh-oh, I can't have them listen to that. So I've avoided a lot of the Tubin jokes that I would otherwise like to make. But one reason why I don't have I can tell you this, if Tubin were a conservative, for whatever reason, they'd be trying to say that he should have, sex crime charges pushed against him, that it was indecent exposure on purpose. That's true. No one's even mentioned that. And by the way, I don't think that should happen to anybody. But I'm just telling you the difference in the media approach. You're going to see this. Jeffrey Toobin is, it's embarrassing. And, I mean, we don't have to get into it, but he certainly got into it. Sorry. I mean, come on. I can't. But he's already a millionaire. He's already got these very privileged sinecures at places like the New Yorker and CNN. He's going to come back, and it's going to be fine. Anderson Cooper will bow and genuflect when Toobin comes on to talk about his legal analysis. What are the worst legal analysts on TV? Just says stuff all the time that's not true, that's not intelligent, but it's exactly what the Democrat left wants to hear, right? It's what the Upper West Side and, in New York City and Calorama in D.C. and Santa Monica and Beverly Hills in California, it's what they want to hear. And Toobin provides. And, of course, all those counties around D.C. where all the rich people who, why are they rich again? Oh, yeah, that's right. Proximity to government. That's where they live. So, but Toobin will be fine. They take care of their own. Do you know what Peter Strzok is doing right now? A lot of you say, Buck, he should be in prison. Right. Do you know where he is? Teaching at Georgetown University. Yeah, there you go. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You know what James Comey's doing? Counting his millions from his book deal and tour and speaking events and yeah. You know what General Flynn is doing? Still trying to get out of a farcical, unjust, evil, corrupt prosecution. You see the trend, friends? You see what happens? Just wait until I'm here telling you about, it's the Biden administration. And now Buck Sexton is having his first really thorough IRS deep dive into everything I've ever done for the last 7 years day. That's going to happen at some point. I'm ready for it. The good news is I'm very good at crossing my T's and dotting my I's, but it doesn't matter who you are. If the IRS wants to make things miserable for you, they can. And Democrats, like Bill Clinton, as we all know, love using the IRS against their enemies. Oh, I'm sorry. Like Barack Obama, too. Lois Lerner, sure. She was the only one who was going after groups that said, Patriot or Tea Party or anything like that were nonprofits. It was just Lois Lerner's own initiative. Yeah, sure. This is like when the mafia boss, I never gave the order. Yeah, you never gave the order because you tell everybody things whispered in your ear in the back of a restaurant that you sweep for bugs every day. We all know what's really going on. We all know who was really giving that order to go after the Tea Party. It wasn't Lois Lerner on her own, folks. But what a look. If you're just judging the other side by the effectiveness of its ruthless moves, Democrats have a lot to teach us. Democrats don't care that they ran this Russia playbook the last time around. They're doing it again. Doesn't matter that it's obvious to anybody how fraudulent this whole thing is, how unfair, how unethical. As far as they're concerned, the more unethical, the better. It shows resolve. It shows zealotry, dedication. If you want to be a good little leftist, you better be a part of the revolution, friends, or else you're a counter-revolutionary. And counter-revolutionaries do not have good outcomes when the left takes over. That's another part of this. I do believe if Joe Biden wins this election, there will be consequences for a lot of us. I think that there will be an effort to use social media platforms to silence even more. I do believe we're going to reach a point where all of the tweets worth reading will say sensitive content warning on them. Those will be the only ones you want to read, because everything else is just the echo chamber propaganda of the left. It's all the same stuff. And I think people, naturally, we'd like to believe that there's a state of balance in our politics and a state of balance in our media. It's not true. It's not true. In a lot of countries, you have one-party rule. In a lot of countries around the world that are supposedly, free and open or relatively free and open, you really have one ideology that completely dominates the public discussion, and anybody who dissents from it is ridiculed and ostracized and shut down. So we are an anomaly in this regard. The fact that we're even really trying, and that our two-party system represents people on both sides of very different ideas. There are big separations. I'm glad we don't have. Usually there are people that try to get attention for themselves during an election by saying both parties are the same. There's no difference. And this is supposed to be really edgy thinking. No, that's not true. Both parties are not the same. They suffer from some of the same structural shortcomings, But those are also just human failings. It's like saying, well, people are greedy and lie and don't do right. That's always going to be true. But if you're looking at what the parties represent and what they want to accomplish, there's some enormous differences. There's the difference, for one, and I found this so fascinating. I pointed this out, what was it, just yesterday, that of all the things that Trump gets credit for, there's one that I think it's so interesting. He hasn't started a war in 4 years. He's the first president in decades for whom that is true, and the media just doesn't care. You never hear about this. The anti-war left doesn't care, never gets a mention from them. Their opposition to war was apparently political, not ethical. I shared that online on Twitter a day or two ago, and it went very viral because I think it is such an overlooked point in all of this. I'm somebody who has grown up. I mean, my entire adult life essentially has just been a series of American wars and occupations. Trump is the first president to stop that. And they said he was going to go to war with Iran. They said he was going to go to war with North Korea. It's not true. We have results. This is about facts. This is not about perception. We did not go to war with any of these countries. He started pushing back on China for its illicit trade practices and all of the scheming and undermining of our economy and the theft of intellectual property that China does. We were told, that might lead to a war. No, it hasn't. What it's led to is the Chinese government, finally the Chinese Communist Party, being put on notice. There's a new sheriff in town. Now, they don't like that sheriff, but that's because he's defending the defenseless farmers, i.e. the American people, who are left to the rapacious mercantilism of the Chinese Communist Party's trade policies. Not anymore. Now, that's all changed. In fact, foreign policy, where the president also has peace deals in the Middle East, not done by decades of previous attempts by other presidents of both parties. The president on foreign policy, it's really one of his areas of biggest success, the U.S. Mexico-Canada trade deal, for example. They say pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord is a bad idea. That whole thing is a joke. It's just all a big global virtue signaling bacchanal. Oh, yeah, they're all going to hold themselves to account for their carbon emissions. Nobody really believes that. No one really takes that seriously. Countries aren't going to make themselves, objectively, countries are not going to make themselves poorer. Certainly large companies that think they have a big growth in their future because of climate change. That's not going to happen. But the president hasn't started new wars, and yet that's never talked about. And perhaps because I not only come from a generation that's been fighting wars, but I was in war zones. I remember what it was like to feel the first pulse from a distance of a car bomb going off. I remember the first sirens blaring to let me know, incoming, run for your life. There are mortar rounds falling around you. I remember visiting a friend of mine, a dear friend in Walter Reed, because one of those mortar rounds almost sheared off his leg. He barely lived. And I remember seeing the body count coming in of Iraqis, of Americans, day in and day out as I was working the Iraq desk at the CIA, and then being in country and hearing the gun battles and gunfire, being in a Black Hawk when they started lighting it up with 240 Gulf machine guns because they either thought there was something on the ground or they were doing target practice. I never even asked. I just remember being on that Black Hawk and thinking, oh, well, now we're in a war zone and there are machine guns firing all around me. This is an interesting circumstance. When you've been around that kind of stuff, when you've seen it, and when you've seen the faces, I remember another friend of mine who I had just seen. I was supposed to go to a meeting with them, and he was SF. He was Special Forces, and I was going to accompany them to a meeting with a source, and I couldn't go because helicopter schedule change. I was taking a helo, so I had to, because I was hitching a ride on a military bird, and so I don't get to tell them where the bird's coming and going. And I missed that meeting. And the next day, he ended up with his team taking down an HVT on the way to the meeting and got hit with a suicide vest and ball bearings. I remember seeing him. He lifted the patches off as he was hobbling around the military base where we met up later. And he had perfectly little cylindrical holes from where the ball bearings went in. And he was fine, God bless. He was okay. None of his team were seriously wounded. They got some ball bearings, but they were far enough that none of them died. And I remember seeing this and being around this as just a civilian CIA analyst in country and then in Afghanistan later on. And we're not doing that to our guys again. We're not doing that. And that's a big deal because a lot of people came home missing arms and legs, severely burned. A lot of people came home with PTSD. And that's something that a commander-in-chief has to live with forever. This president has been doing everything he can to make sure that we have as few of those situations as possible. It's an enormous positive because we don't need to be fighting a war. We don't need to fight a war with Iran. We don't need to fight a war with China. We don't need to do this. We don't need to topple a government in Libya. And you would think that people would care more, especially in the media, about this, but no. Their opposition to war was never ethical, never moral. It was political. It was a cudgel, a weapon to attack Republicans.
Hey, Team Buck, thank you so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, please click that little thumbs up button so then it will log as liked. And also, if you want to see more great content from The First, please click subscribe.